How'd you get in here? Why are you in my house? Oh, well, why didn't you say so? Hey there, I'm Martin, and I'm the solo developer for a game called Neverwake. During my free time over the last couple of years, I've been learning game development, and I'd like to share my progress with you, going over the hurdles I've experienced while working between several different game engines, some of the features I've included, as well as my process for art and animation. So before any of that, what is Neverwake? Neverwake is a 2.5D platformer / turn-based JRPG where bosses are your abilities. Most platformers tend to provide these abilities either innately through an upgrade system, temporarily through power-ups, or in some cases partners through plot-driven elements. Neverwake subverts this through having a partner system rewarded by defeating bosses to navigate through the overworld. For example, why ground pound through breakable blocks when you can get pile-driven through them? Here are the concept designs for the bosses that will join your party. I think I got a good mixture of wacky and cool designs, and it'll be fun to delve more into these characters in the future. We'll get back to one of these fellas in a bit. You play as the main character Jade, who must navigate through a strange world, similar to our own, but with inexplicable anomalies and undiscovered creatures, as she attempts to find out what's causing her friends and inhabitants to disappear. Think of the cutesy elements of the Paper Mario series sprinkled with elements of psychological horror. Like what you've heard so far? Then you should take a seat. When conceptualizing the game, I tried drawing inspiration from some of my favorite games and animated shows, and I managed to narrow it down to a few. Let's start with the plumber. I really enjoy Super Mario RPG's snappy combat system, even more so with the action gauge system in the remake that rewards you for perfect blocks and attacks. I also took some inspiration from Paper Mario's partner system for platforming sections of battle. However, I want to take it a step further by implementing combination moves, similar to the combo text in Chrono Trigger. Earthbound's rolling HP system was a really smart way to keep party members in the fight even if they're inflicted mortal damage. This added a lot of tension to get your turn in and heal them before their HP reaches 0. I also really liked the instant win system where you can automatically win a fight without going to battle, with the odds increasing if you sneak behind an enemy, and enemies having an additional turn in battle if they sneak behind you. These are some really cool mechanics that I would love to see added, and to a certain extent, I've conceptualized the auto win scenario here. I envision adding a quick animation of a partner knocking out the enemy as the camera rotates in the future, but this is all I've got going for it for now. Speaking of animations, Dragon Ball Z has always been a huge part of my life as an artist, and I want to recreate that same energy both in style and animation. Now, a bit of a confession, I didn't really play this last one, but I just had to add it. I watched a good friend of mine play it, you'll see him later. But man, Persona 5 houses some of the most stylish UI I've ever seen in a game, from the font styles to the character animations within the graphics themselves, just something I'd also like to try to recreate. Alright, let me share the progress I've made so far, so let's head on over into Unity and... So I'm sure most of you have heard about the whole Unity installation fee debacle, and even though Unity pulled back on these policy changes, a lot of developers completely lost their trust as a result. I was previously working on the project in Unity, but in the middle of the uncertainty at the time, I decided to jump ship and move over to Unreal Engine 5, which so far I've been enjoying a lot, particularly the blueprint system, which makes it relatively quick and easy to prototype new features. My precious little Lego blocks. So far, a majority of the work has been placed in the overworld, getting the player controller to feel just right, which includes mechanics like variable jump height, apex hang time, clan fall speed, fast falling, jump over.
Editor here. I've made a mere boo-boo at this part. I didn't really show the correct time frame of when the jump buffer is actually at work here. I'm very sorry. Unfortunately, when you make mistakes as Posticle's editor, you were given a sheet of punishments. So I'm just gonna read those real quick. If you messed up a timestamp, you must eat a Popeye's biscuit with no bev. What are you, some kind of fucking monster? What do you mean? Hey, get your hands off! Oh! Oh!
Coyote time, and corner correction, to name a few. These are the sorts of hidden mechanics that players take for granted, and only notice when they're not present. I also started on implementing the first boss's partner abilities. This guy's name is Brick. the powerhouse of the group. His first ability serves as the player's double jump, but is more of a throw. You'll be stopped in midair and can aim in a direction you want to be thrown. Pretty self-explanatory, but feels more flashy compared to just a normal double jump. The way it currently works, when you go into a throw state, you pick a direction along a 2D plane around the player, and are launched into that direction. I chose this in lieu of picking any direction within a 3D space of the player because it seemed far more approachable when combined with the player controller having relatively precise air controls, making for more intuitive movement. Brick's second ability allows you to break through breakable blocks. Although instead of just ground pounding, he'll perform an uppercut into a pile drive. When designing these abilities, I wanted to try to inject the partner's personality into it as much as I could. In the future, I also want to provide cancels to abilities which can then be combined with other abilities, which will open up ways to speed up gameplay. Some hurdles I've run into are things that weren't entirely noticeable until further playtesting. So for example, with this ability, I had originally added a box collision underneath the player that would check for breakable blocks once you reach the apex of the pile driver to destroy them. Now this seemed to work fine at 60 frames per second. When testing at 30 frames per second or below, I noticed on occasion that the blocks weren't getting destroyed and the player would just land on the breakable block. My second thought was, okay, maybe I need to change the height of the box collider based on the calculated frames per second. Although it did improve things a little, this felt a little too hacky of a solution to me. After doing a little bit of research, I found that in Unreal there's a way to adjust collision channels of static mesh components. So for example, a standard platform that has a block collision response, if you want objects to pass through it but still want an event to fire, you can use overlap. So now by getting actors within the world that are breakable, we can set their static mesh collision response when pile driving to overlap and destroy the block when passing through just fine. Then we can set it back to block when exiting the pile driver. As far as the battle systems go, this was the part I was the most hazy on, but after doing some research, thanks in major part to Rylan Laley's tutorial series on JRPGs, I managed to make some fairly decent progress. Party member data is able to be transferred between maps, fit into spawn points, and attack commands are able to be issued on enemies with some basic AI move to scripting. Still needs a ton of work, but I figure it's a good start. So music is definitely a weak spot for me, but fortunately I have a friend to help me out. Actually now that I mention it, hold on, I gotta find him. Huh?
Hey Martin, what brings you down here?
I just heard a bunch of noise upstairs. What's with the sign?
Oh, this is where I put my Goonies merchandise. You know the movie that goes, Hey, I'm Sunko, Pasta's basement. Sorry, I think I had a piece of chicken in my throat. What I meant to say was composer for Neverwake. Now, Pasta and I have been really good friends for a very long time. In fact, I'd even consider him my best friend. But the script doesn't say that, so I'm gonna assume that I was lied to for all these years. It's fine, though. And like all good friends do, eventually you start talking your passions, right? What you dream about doing. And of course, Pasta's was to create a game. So we started brainstorming a crap ton, talking about gameplay, story, all that jazz. And eventually, we thought we came up with something cool. Just like his basement. As you could have already guessed, it's Neverwake. And now we wanted to officially bring that idea to life. But there was something that Pasta didn't feel too confident in, and that was music. When I originally brought it up to him, he thought about learning how to do it himself, but eventually kind of realized how much work he'd be taking on at that point, being a solo dev. And yet still, he's doing a lot of work already, more than I would have at this point. So because I think Martin is a crazy cool person and I'm secretly in love with him, I decided that I would help by handling the soundtrack stuff myself. You see, I don't have a crap ton of experience with making soundtracks. I've only really made music for myself for fun, right? I never really put it into some project, but that's kind of something I've always wanted to do. I just felt like this was a cool opportunity to learn and improve. With that said, I did make some little snippets for Neverwake to get an idea rolling of what it could sound like, so here they are. Most of these tracks were done with GarageBand on iOS, and I think they sound all right for now, but they should really spend some more time in the oven.
Luckily, the game is in really early development, so I have some time to research and find myself some equipment to make better sounds. And not only that, but pick up music theory along the way, since I've been playing most of these by ear, and I figure it'd be really useful to try and communicate what I'm doing once I get further into these devlogs and have more segments. All in all, I'm pretty happy with the results so far. I can't wait to learn some more new exciting stuff.
Process making those noises he makes when he's about to wake up. So I'll check you later. Hope you've enjoyed what you heard so far. And yeah, I love you.
The most time-consuming but rewarding experience so far has been working on art assets. So fortunately I have a lot of experience with character art, so picking up animation wasn't as hard for me. Originally I was going for a pixel-based art style, but since pixel art is kinda low resolution by design, it was kinda irritating because I wanted to have as close of a representation to the characters I could in-game. So I decided to switch over to a hand-drawn art style for sprites, which just feels so much better to me personally. At one point I had thought of trying to go for Super Mario RPG's isometric style, but the lack of depth perception at this angle can lead to frustrating moments. I love this game, but Bowser's Keep is such a pain. For the art style, I tried going for a fusion of cartoon and anime, sort of like how Western cartoons in the early 2000s adopted elements of anime, like Teen Titans or Hi Hi Puffy Ami-Yumi. It's a style I haven't really seen done much in recent memory and just felt right to me. I also tend to prefer more vibrant palettes, which just gives this one-tone shading this extra pop, especially when shading with color rather than just a change in darkness. The hardest part of this style early on was just deciding what's the right amount of detail. You can kind of see with my old player designs for Jade, like with this kick animation, I was too focused on adding these small details that you're never going to see at smaller resolutions. Learning how to balance between simple designs and adding just enough detail has definitely made the animation process a lot smoother. Speaking of animation, for a couple of years now I've been using Krita for my animations, which is a really great free and open source tool for art and animation. If you're familiar with any sort of Photoshop-like software, you should feel right at home. For conveying motion, I tried applying techniques such as speedlines and smearing, which work nicely with lower frame rates. I tend to go for somewhere between 10 to 20 frames per second, which is much lower than the standard 24 frames per second, but honestly it doesn't matter so long as the keyframes are strong enough to indicate movement as our brain fills the movement in between. I wouldn't consider myself that great of an animator, but given how far I've gotten so far, I'm pretty happy with the results. Prior to starting this project, I had no experience in 3D modeling for environments. I went with Blender seeing as it's a great free option. This shouldn't be too hard, right? It was painful to say the least, but not impossible. I think at the very least, it's a lot less painful when I don't have to worry about rigging characters or anything like that. I try to limit the scope to just creating relatively low polystatic meshes without animating or texturing. If there was a course I could recommend for getting started, I use Grant Abbott's Low Poly Landscapes Udemy course, which compared to the Donut tutorial everyone uses, just felt a lot more digestible. I managed to get a few test models done, which didn't come out too bad, although it's something I'll need to get better with over time. Eventually I'll need to tackle these things in the future, but for right now, I think the assets I've created so far don't look half bad. After applying this really nice shader system I found on the Unreal Marketplace, I was able to add this pretty sweet looking comic book outline effect to the environmental assets, which matches up nicely with the character sprites. Listen, making a game, especially on your own, is an incredibly daunting task, filled with all sorts of unknowns. For me, I know I still have a long way to go, but I'm happy to have gotten this far, and I hope that you'll follow along with me on my journey. I provided a link to my Discord server in the description below. It's still fairly new, but I'll be posting my progress more frequently there. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.